So, 20-day carnivore challenge. So, 20-day carnivore challenge. Why did I do it? I think I'm always keen to very much experiment with different diets, different systems of training, different ways of looking at things for lots of different reasons. I like to challenge myself and I like to push the boundaries and see what's possible. Also, I am interested in changing my physiology, staying as lean as possible, and also trying to bring out into the open, what am I trying to say? I'm trying to understand what works and what hasn't been explored, and what paradigms need to shift, and how other people might benefit from some of these newer concepts that are coming out into the world. This one is kind of out there, left field for pretty much most people, I would say. And what does it involve? Well, as it sounds, for 20 days you eat basically animal products, meat products. So you just eat meat for 20 days. Initially I was quite skeptical, but I've been doing a lot of research and listening to a guy called Paul Saladino. He's quite an interesting guy, and he's a massive proponent of the carnivore diet, as he calls it. Sean Baker as well, another positive influence, I think, in the health space. He also is a massive proponent of the carnivore diet, and they're starting to look at some really interesting studies with chronic illness and how the carnivore diet might be able to help with that. That's kind of why I wanted to test it out, and there's a lot of noise in this space as well, so I actually wanted to put myself through it and understand whether it was going to work. I think Joe Rogan also has tried it a few times now and is a bit of a proponent of the success of it. So interesting stuff in some of the bigger kind of names in the health space. So I thought I'd give it a go. 20 days? Why 20 days? Well, I felt like 30 was a bit long for me and 20 was enough just to kind of start to understand what was going on with my body, what changes, what benefits, what negative aspects I was looking at, and what was happening. So how did it go? Well, before I go into that, I think it's really important to look at measurements. So if we're not measuring, we're not testing, we don't really understand what's going on. However, I do understand science and I do understand research, and these kind of anecdotal self-experimentations are hugely valuable on one hand. On the other hand, there are so many variables in daily life that it can be very hard to distinguish whether the thing you actually did was a benefit, or the fact that you just put some structure in your life and followed a plan. It could have been any other plan and you still would have got a similar result, perhaps. So I'm always kind of like trying to balance self-experimentation with actually what we know happens in a more controlled environment, because my life is the opposite of control. I don't know about you. Anyway, so I did some measurements before and I did some measurements afterwards, and I took a couple of pictures, and we'll go into those in the results. So basically, for 20 days, I've not had any fibre in my diet, any vegetables in my diet, any. I guess those could be seen as the negative aspects of it, but also I've had zero sugar, zero carbohydrate for 20 days. How do I feel? Pretty good. So I don't have any problems with energy. Even into the evening. Usually in the evenings I'm starting to flag a little bit. I'm a morning person. I didn't have any problems with energy going into the evenings. Going to bed, I still felt quite fresh, rested well overnight, which I didn't think I would do on this diet, because I didn't think I would have that bulking carbohydrate load in the evening that actually sees you through and satiates you throughout the evening. So that was an interesting component. What did I include in my diet? I tried to keep it as clean as possible, and this is probably one of the downfalls, I would say, with this diet is as a concept, I don't think it's terrible, but actually the practical applications, I think in modern life where there are lots of distractions, and also the kind of go-to quick foods usually aren't meat-based, and if they are, it's low-grade meat as well. So you've got to really think about the constituent parts of meat when you're going into this diet and what nutrients you're going to get from that. I felt fine, I guess, is the outcome. The challenge I had was implementing the diet, and that took a bit of work, a lot of planning, and also it probably wasn't as clean as it could have been. And in some circumstances, I had to rely on low-grade meat, which is never a good idea, because my life is very, very busy, and I didn't have the chance to kind of go to my local butcher all the time and then prepare the meat and then carry it around with me. So I had to go for more quicker options, and that's, I think, where you can become a little bit unstuck. You need to think about what's going into the plants and the animals that you're eating. What you are, what your animal eats, effectively, if you're eating an animal. And the same is for vegetables, probably even more so. Toxins from the ground or lack of nutrients from the ground coming into those vegetables, and then we're just either taking on something on board that isn't really benefiting us, or it's toxic to us because of the environmental factors. Can't emphasize that point enough. So that was that was kind of how I found it. What about the nutrients? What did I miss out on? So fibre is probably the biggest component I think is missing in this diet. Now that goes into the argument, and there's loads of little rabbit holes with this diet. That goes into the argument of do you need fibre in your diet? And that's something that Paul Saladino talks about a lot, is this notion that we've got around different food types and how they should be included in our diet. And I think it's always interesting when people come into this space and try to disrupt it with really looking at the fundamental paradigms. And I think that's a very healthy approach to looking at anything, really, is actually what are the principles that are driving this forward, and are they sound? Does it make sense? Go back to evolution. What were we built upon for a million years, and what do we evolve to eat as a primary food source? So not what could we eat, what is our primary food source? We were able to eat vegetables and other things, but they weren't the preference. The preference was always to have meat, and actually it was always to have, and if you look back to other animals and how they eat, is always to have the organ meats. That's what a lion, a tiger will eat first, and the muscles, the bit that we like, the steaks, actually get left and get eaten kind of last, if you like. That's an interesting thing to think about. I didn't have a problem with any vitamin deficiency or anything over the 20 days. Obviously, it's a relatively short space of time. The one factor that the negative aspect of it was I got a little bit constipated, and I struggled in that department, if I'm honest. And the concept that kind of makes sense from some of the other reading I've done, because meat is a very good way to actually recolonize your gut, your stomach, and the kind of the upper digestive tract, if you like, and it's very good at feeding those bacteria that are being healthy within the stomach and the gut lining. However, when it gets down to kind of the colon, down to the lower end, that's where fibre really can be very healthy for that part of the body. And in the larger space, where we know we've got these massive chronic problems of obesity, people carrying around too much body fat, actually switching people over onto a meat diet might work quite well, because you just, you physically cannot eat too much meat. And I think that's probably another factor for me, was getting enough calories on board in a very busy schedule, and building out what would be kind of like a minimum daily calorific requirement. That opens another can of worms of how many calories do you need. Obviously, if you're taking different nutrients on board, different macronutrients on board, the argument is there to say you need different amounts of macronutrients. So the whole concept of calories brings that into question, and I've got massive concerns around that. it's not an approach that I'm an advocate of. Certainly not in the long term. Short term, maybe it can help you to clarify what's going on and measure, but you cannot. I'd invite you to sit here and argue with me that 1,000 calories of pasta is the same to the human body as 1,000 calories of ribeye steak. It just doesn't add up like that. So using a single metric across macros or across micronutrients as well, I think is a massive error in the space, and it's created a lot of noise and a lot of confusion and a lot of upset. So the results, what do we think? So here's a before picture, not very impressive. Awesome. And here's the after picture. So put the two together, it's hard to see any change from my perspective. Maybe you can, but it was 20 days, probably not long enough, and I'm pretty lean as it is, and I wasn't training particularly hard. I wasn't in a particular training cycle for that as well. I'm doing lots of running and less kind of like building muscle. So doesn't look great. Over 20 days, didn't have a lot of fat to lose, but I did make some measurements. So drum roll. I did the Caliper Test, which is kind of like you pinch on in 3 different body parts and measure that fat, take an average. Before I started the carnivore diet, I was hovering around probably 17-18% body fat, maybe a little bit less than that. Coming out of the 20 days, I dropped down to about 15, maybe 14. So in 20 days, in theory, I dropped 3-4 body fat percentage points. What does that mean? Does it mean the carnivore diet is amazing? Well, probably not. I'd had a period of increasing my body fat, eating loads of junk, feasting over Christmas, eating too much, not looking after myself, probably not training as hard. Then I went on to a strict diet for 20 days that included no sugar, no carbohydrates. So obviously you're going to see that drop off. It's not just the fact that it was meat and the benefits of meat. I can't sit here and say that was the case. It was a structured approach, and I was disciplined. Those are probably the overriding factors, not the actual thing itself. It's not so much the actual implementing the thing, it's more the taking action towards that and building a structure around it and following a disciplined approach. It's the framework that sits around the actual thing that you're going to do, especially when it comes to nutrition. And I think we see that. So maybe I'll link to some papers below where a human study was done. People ate only vegan diet and dropped weight. People only ate carbohydrates and dropped weight. People only had a very low carbohydrate diet and lost weight. It's a very, very murky world. And I think you've got to look beyond these basic metrics that were thrown at us in the marketing or the methods, and really understand what's going on with you. I can't speak for you, but for me, having high quality meats and fishes, high quality organic vegetables where I know the soil is rich, and low sugars, which technically will mean a low carbohydrate diet by the main metrics that are out there, makes sense. And incorporating into that all the things that I want to do in life, all the fun aspects as well, and balance is absolutely the key. Right, what did we do to get to this point before we had all this technology, before we had all these processed foods in our faces? What do? We went out, we hunted meat and we ate meat, and that's largely what we did. So the key factors, energy levels were fantastic. My cognitive awareness and ability was very, very good. And I never got that bloaty, full feeling of eating too much, because it's very hard to eat too much on this diet. If you like this and you want more of this sort of content, fitness, health, nutrition, mindset, click the subscribe, and I will see you on the next one.